Step in our budget deliberations, and Rick is all set up to go. I'm going to hand it straight over to Rick when you're ready to go. Get the tech up. There you go.
Look at that. We're all set. Thank you, Your Worship, and good evening, Council and to members of the public listening in. Tonight, staff are seeking direction to bring back the financial plan bylaw for approval based on a property tax increase of 5.5%, including 1% to reduce the infrastructure deficit. Last week, Council expressed support for this direction, as well as concerns about future rate increases and Council's ability to deliver on priorities over its term. At this stage in the process, I can advise there's no additional funding available, and with increasing risk, we'll likely need to further reduce or defer spending later this year. While we'll have more certainty on our financial position when we come back with the budget outlook in July, Council might consider a change before then by directing staff to explore options for changes which result in no net increase in the 5-year budget. While all municipalities in the region are experiencing challenges, the district's current challenges are more intense than others. I'll speak more on this a little bit later in the presentation. This plan does advance work on our community goals. It also places the organization on a more sustainable financial path, including an estimated $4.3 million in ongoing savings through this year's operating budget. This plan is also flexible, including contingency provisions, though these provisions are actively being reassessed due to the likely impacts from the recently imposed tariffs. This is the final meeting before bringing back the financial plan bylaw for approval on March 17th. Once the financial plan bylaw is adopted, there will be opportunities to amend the plan later this year. Last meeting, there were questions about sewer charges, and so this information has been brought back to ensure that there's clarity around the charges and how rates are expected to change. The best available information at this time shows Metro Vancouver sewer fees increasing by $1,005 on a single-family home over the next 5 years, including $415 for the original plan for the North Shore wastewater treatment plant, and an additional $590 for the $2.8 billion in extraordinary costs required to complete the plan. The total increase in the sewer rate over the next 5 years is an estimated $1,093, including $88 for the district's costs. Council has asked the province for a public inquiry, and the district continues to explore all avenues available regarding the North Shore wastewater treatment plant cost overruns. This slide shows the same total increase with the rates for each year, starting with the rate of $946 last year and ending with a rate of $2,039 by 2029. 2025, Metro Vancouver charges increased $308, and you'll notice the district's costs decrease $127 as rates are stabilized through the use of district's reserves. Council continues to press the province to consider allowing deferment of utility payments to reduce impacts on our ratepayers, and anyone listening in that would like to find additional information on these and other utility charges can find that information on the district's website at mb.org. This slide summarizes the changes that were necessary to bring down this year's property tax increase from a starting point of 9% last October to the proposed 5.5%. Implementing these changes is expected to reduce staff capacity in the near term, and some of the proposed initiatives will need to be brought back later this year for further council direction. In the outer years, protective services are expected to continue to increase at rates above inflation, and closing the infrastructure deficit, addressing impacts from affordable housing, and setting aside funding for increased risks also need to be factored in. With all this in mind, property taxes are expected to continue to increase in the range of 5.5% per year. Staff are seeking direction to bring back options for council's consideration through the 2026 budget outlook this July in order to give staff the proper amount of time to assess changes that may be required to bring future rate increases down. This year, we'll be working through the OCP update. As council works through this, there will be opportunities to revisit service levels, including targets for affordable housing, maintaining our infrastructure, supporting transit to the North Shore, response times for police and fire services, the quantity, quality, the quantity and quality of our recreation, parks, and cultural facilities, and the actions we need to take to reduce climate-related risks in the community. Ideally, these service levels would be considered together and balanced against the financial limits set in the 10-year financial plan. Impacts from senior governments also need to be considered along with the state of our infrastructure. Financial results will be communicated quarterly through the Finance and Audit Committee and to Council through the annual budget process. As we continue to focus on reducing spending, this year's financial plan amendment will consider how well we're using our assets and the potential for decommissioning some of them. Capital plan will also continue to be adjusted based on the work that can be achieved over the coming year and the emerging risks that we're now facing. There are also changes to fees and charges that will be brought back through future meetings for Council's consideration. A few final thoughts with respect to public assets. The district has been a leader in asset management for many years, led by Council through its stewardship role over the district's public assets. In last fall's budget engagement, public rated replacement of aging infrastructure and upgrades to our culverts and drainage systems as the most important projects that we can undertake. The district continues to perform well in its asset management planning, and Council's commitment to closing the infrastructure deficit is helping us achieve good results. But there's still more work that needs to be done. Staff will be bringing back a State of the Assets report to the Finance and Audit Committee this April and then in subsequent meetings. The province is also implementing changes just this year to its local government reporting on public assets to ensure that there's more transparency on municipal performance in this area. Oops. While all municipalities are facing challenges, the district's challenges are somewhat unique in the Lower Mainland. While there continues to be a debate about whether growth pays for growth, there's no question that some municipalities are using recent growth to balance their budgets in the near term. And while all municipalities are being impacted by increasing regional charges, the charges on the North Shore are expected to be more than double some of the other areas in Metro Vancouver over the next 5 years. As one of the wettest municipalities in the Lower Mainland, we're also experiencing more intense storms, requiring more proactive public works to reduce risk. And for this year, North Vancouver is experiencing significant cost increases related to our police telecom service, as these services have transitioned over to e-com. So it's been a number of things that have been unique about our cost structure this year and bringing down the rate increase to the proposed 5.5% hasn't been easy. So while we are facing these unique challenges, the operating budget it was adjusted for these impacts and has been reduced. And we do have plans in place to guide future budgets. We're also introducing new tools to make the process more interactive and easier to understand. We see this as a priority for Council through the many discussions over the last number of months, and staff are busy implementing these changes and are aiming to have those changes in place prior to next year's budget. Whoops. So to summarize, tonight staff are seeking direction to bring back the financial plan bylaws for approval, to report back on options for future ratepayer increases, and to advance Council priorities. As there's no additional funding available, Council might direct staff to explore options for changes which result in no net increase to the 5-year budget. And with that, I'll pass it back to the Mayor.
Thank you. I see Mr. Stewart's hand up. You're muted, Dave.
We're entering into really unprecedented.
Hold on.
We're just turning your volume back up. Go for it.
Let me know when I go.
Go for it.
Okay. We are really entering into unprecedented times, and I really suggest that you understand that what we once did was a annual budget, and you called it a day, and you made a few adjustments. And that's not the world that we live in today. The world we live in today is changing circumstances in which we're probably going to be making adjustments, I don't know, every 4 months. And that's just going to be, that's going to reflect the reality that we live in. And certainly in the sense of the the tariff wars and all the rest, we really don't know where we're going. But we are understanding as staff what we have to do, but we understand also that we have to be able to report back to council and make adjustments, and not just every year, but actually probably every quarter. And I think that's the reality that we're living in.
Thanks, Dave. So I think I have asked Genevieve to put a timer up for this meeting to make sure that we are minding our time. What I would like to do is sort of go around the horn, give everybody an opportunity to have a chance to speak, and then we'll follow up with more question and answer period until we're satisfied that the matter's dealt with. So I wanted to start, well, first I picked up something in your report. I was just going to mention, you talked about the weather events, but have you ever publicly talked about the amount of what the surcharge from Metro Vancouver is for rain ingress?
What weather pricing?
The wet weather pricing is being implemented over the next 2 years. Last year was year number 1. And the estimated impact is up to 5%, but the metering hasn't been completed, so we won't know until, at least for the North Shore, until the end of 2026, and the other regions will be completed in 2027, I believe. So they're using other means to estimate, but the most accurate means will be in place by 2026.
Yeah,
So a 5% increase, in those charges is significant. It could be anywhere between $5 and $10 million a year if the cost increases beyond 2029 continue at, say, in the range of 5 to 10% per year. So it's definitely a significant consideration, and we need to plan for mitigation now.
Mr. Stewart, do you have additional comments?
Well, I just said, Rick's already answered that. Don't use percentages. Let's talk about real costs. Sure.
Yeah, we're waiting to get the final real costs on it, but where we're at is, so as a strategy, Metro Vancouver recognizes that when we're treating rainwater, that's a problem for our wastewater treatment facilities. And so they've decided to surcharge municipalities that have too much ingress. So that's usually where a tree limb has lifted a pipe up and you get rain going into the system, or a manhole cover's not properly closed and so water goes in through that way. But the frustrating part is that Vancouver and New Westminster have entirely combined sewer and sanitary systems, and they've gotten a reprieve from some of these costs. And so we're sitting there as a municipality that is in the middle of a rainforest, and we're going to get surcharged for rain impacts into our system when other municipalities that have a combined sewer system forcing them to have an even higher level of rainwater in their sewage, that they're getting away with it. And so I find that very frustrating. When we talk about borrowing, from the time of the start of, when we looked at the last 5-year financial plan starting in 2020, end of 2023, I guess it was, when we got out to the end of the 5-year plan, so 2024 to 2029, we were talking about being at about $90 million in debt at that point, in long-term debt that we were servicing. Where will this put us at the end of the 5-year plan in terms of long-term debt that we're servicing?
Elio, our manager of financial services, looked at that today, and we're estimating to end this year just over $40 million in outstanding debt, and by the end of 2029, it'll be closer to $100 million, somewhere around 96. That's all subject to the rates that can be secured and
So the
costs for the programs.
The 5.5 is not a true 5.5. It's a 5.5 with a combination of drawing down some reserves related to the stabilization of the utility rate, and also extension of some additional long-term debt. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So we're already well above the 5.5, and that's not always, everybody wants to compare municipality to municipality, but there are some things that are outside of the figure that don't always get captured in it, and you have to dig it to sort of the next level on it. If I was looking at the situation we're in right now with the financial pressures that we have and the construction challenge that we're facing with almost every single contract coming back with updates and changes upwards in a significant way. He gave us a number about the AT fields, about what they're originally budgeted for, the ones that we had under the works, and what they're coming back at now. Do you recall what that number was?
I'm sorry, not off the top of my head. I know when those changes were approved in 2023, it's approximately $20 million with all the fields, and now, of course, we're only proceeding.
Yeah, and lots of the delays weren't just because of decision or supply chain. A lot of the delays were because either the ground wasn't ready, or in the case of Argyle, as an example, there was a dispute. Sorry, that was Handsworth actually, was the dispute over the contract completion. And so we were delayed in getting the field released back to us. On Argyle, again, it took them so long to get the old building deconstructed off the side that we ended up, again, having delays in being able to deliver the Argyle turf field. But a lot of those delays ended up causing significant increase in cost. Down at Inter River, we still wait for big chunks of Inter River to be subsided enough that they'll be stable enough for drainage infrastructure. But it's a challenge building down there. It's an old dump site still. But anyway, a lot of that is what's been driving up the costs that we've been seeing for these projects. Now, I don't have a strong axe to grind either way on completion extension to Spirit Trail or on AT field delivery. I think we have been delivering a lot of AT product in our community. We have one of the highest levels of artificial turf field inventory based on population. I get that the soccer community would like it to be based on registration rather than on population. But you know, if I have to decide between the two, whether I think which one I think is a higher priority between extension of the Spirit Trail work, which I've been shocked by some of the contract prices that have come back, I would tend to say that I'd be more inclined to support it going into the next project within the AT's here, rather than continuing on with the eastern extension of the Spirit Trail. That bridge, I don't know whether it's over engineering or whether it's just contracts that are coming back, but you know, being proposed at $7 million to cross McCartney Creek, I have a very real difficulty with that for what we get. And I get that some of it is some almost 40-cent dollars with some grants that we could potentially get in that area, but it's still, I have a problem committing public dollars to such an immense cost for a relatively low public benefit going forward on it. So, you know, as you're looking at the strategy, I know that other council members are going to comment on it, but it's, was that the beat?
Yeah.
Oh, it's going to be louder. I'll just charge on through it. That was the beat.
And
But I just, I don't know if others feel the same way, but I think that I'm inclined, as tight as we are at this point, that I would probably be prioritizing the next AT project versus the extension completion of the Spirit Trail at this time. And I know it's not as simple as that because there's grants and such, but that would be my preference and priority. Mr. Stewart?
I'll just say something really simple. I went to the grocery store the other day, and what was $3.99 for bacon was $5.99, or actually it was $7.99, and that's the costs that we're encountering on everything. And so we just have to scale back. Honestly, we have to scale back because we can't deliver everything that everybody wants to do.
Oh, I understand that. I said we go around once, but that doesn't have to be in order. So I have seen Councillor Hanson, Councillor Pope, Councillor Murray. So we'll start there and then give everybody else an opportunity at that point.
All right. Thank you, Mayor Little, for your comments. Thank everyone involved in the preparation, particularly you, Mr. Donnelly, for the 2025-2029 plan. And I certainly appreciate this is a challenging exercise in a very uncertain economic environment. I am going to support what's put forward, the 5.5% tax increase, the 4.5% for operations, the 1% for infrastructure. For the moment, I'm content with the delay or postponement of the Spirit Trail, the eastern portion. For the moment, I'm content with the postponement of the gravel field conversions. And I say that because I'm going to make the following comments broadly about the budget and about where we're at. First of all, first comment I make is we're clearly in very uncertain times financially. And it's clear to everyone around this table that in the months and years ahead, there's a brewing trade war and indeed other economic circumstances that existed before that trade war, which could cause us to experience extremely significant financial disruptions. So when I approve the 5.5% and all that's involved in that and the capital allocations that are considered in that, I think we all must do so with the willingness or the understanding we may need to make significant changes to our budget to respond to changing events. And let me say as well that from my point of view, I doubt that we're going to be achieving significant assistance from senior government in this hour. And financially, nor are we going to be getting, in my view, significant new funding sources internally. I think that's very optimistic. I personally would like to see a top to bottom review of our spending priorities. We talk about the $7.5 million bridge. We talk about balancing off the Spirit Trail and the turf, the gravel field conversions, and so many other trade-offs. I think given the uncertain times we're in, the demands that we're facing, the financial pressures, that although it is painstaking and although it is a time-consuming exercise for council, I think we need to do a line-by-line, item-by-item review and make sure that the priorities of the budget are indeed the priorities of our that may, and it's in view of that I'm not going to wade into specific comments as to where the greater demand lies, because it may be that economic circumstances and our sense of priorities eclipse that in some way. We're entering into an era where budgeting and taxation will become paramount concerns for this council. And in such an environment, I believe we must be more involved than we have been in allocated and reallocating our spending. We can expect a significant increase in metro utility rates. We've talked about this, a tripling of liquid waste levies within 5 years. And this is only part of a background that we will exert financial pressure on this entity, the district, and on district ratepayers across the board. Going forward, given this environment, I will not be supporting annual tax increases of 5.5%. So to the extent that our 5-year plan is premised on what I saw there, 5.5% going forward, that's not going to get my vote. You have my vote on this one. You're not going to have my vote going forward. I have about 2 more minutes. Is that?
We're going to keep going around.
Okay.
Yeah. So, Councilor Pope.
Oh, thank you. I am going to be specific about things. While this council agrees that we want to keep taxes at 5.5%, we disagree on how to do that. This budget calls for cuts to be made on some projects that many, many members of this community have been fighting for years. And one of those cuts is converting 2 gravel fields to turf fields, which would enable thousands more young soccer players to play on a proper field. And the reason this is important is because gravel, as any parent or kid knows, is brutal, and especially during the winter when it's raining. And what I find particularly annoying is that some of these other projects, the ATFs at Handsworth and Midge River that are finally going ahead, are now hugely over budget because they've been delayed and deferred for years. Had we built the Handsworth ATF and the Inter-River ATF when this council first committed to them years ago, we would have literally saved millions. Instead, we keep deferring and pushing them down the road. And why can't we look at new ways of doing things? Like, for example, instead of building, what are they, $5 million field houses, washrooms at Handsworth, why can't we just create some access to Handsworth School's washrooms? That's what they do at Carson. And everybody's quite happy with that. I'm sure it's quite an easy thing to do. As far as Spirit Trail, the other objection I have to this budget is to cut the final leg of the Spirit Trail to Deep Cove. Now the plan is to use up millions in provincial and federal government grants on an almost $8 million bridge. And wasn't the whole point to get us to Deep Cove in the first place? Wasn't that the whole point of the Spirit Trail? So this community has made it clear over and over again that it wants and needs outdoor facilities. And additionally, a district survey confirmed that outdoor recreation facilities, parks, trails, sports fields and pickleball courts and disc golf and skateboard parks are a high priority for people who live here. So I think people are tired of the district and this council not doing what we say we're going to do, and we must find ways to make it work. I'm not suggesting we add to the 5.5%. I'm suggesting we find other line items in the budget, such as $10 million at the Northlands Golf Course on washrooms and a kitchen, and millions for fleet renewal that could be delayed or deferred. Those are just a couple of examples that I suggested early on in this process. And I'm disappointed that we don't have any of those options in front of us before now, because several of us keep saying the same thing about the projects we would like to see funded, that the community has asked for, and they're still not even being presented as possible options as to how we could do it, how we could move this dollar around to make it work over there. And so those are my comments initially.
Yeah, Your Worship, I take great exception to Councillor Pope's comments about that we're not listening, we don't care.
Did I say that?
She may not be informed about some of the stuff, but that's just to suggest that we're just spending money because we don't care. That's not appropriate.
Yeah, just want to be clear, so she has asked on a few occasions for a breakdown of the fleet costs and the washroom kitchen project. And when is that coming, Mr. Danlon?
I believe it's with clerks. They've received it. The report simply lays out the full list of the fleet replacements, provides an explanation about when they're replaced, its end-of-life replacement, trying to stretch the dollars as best we can before maintenance costs increase, and also considering safety. The other consideration is all of these things that we're now talking about that are replacements are restricted for those uses. So we have a bylaw in place that allows us only to invest in the renewal capital. It's part of our long-term financial plan to make sure that we look after the $4 billion in infrastructure that we own, including the rolling stock like vehicles, which maintains our services.
So replacement of existing things has a dedicated separated fund.
Yeah.
The other things are sometimes out of new sources of funding or
new sources of funding
taxation
or new
opportunities.
strategies approved by council. We work with you annually on that. The fact is we try to set aside as much as we can for the existing infrastructure. Right now it's about $17 million short on an annual basis. And so we need to increase that funding, not decrease it. But to the point of around Northlands Golf Course, definitely we can look at the golf course and better ways to make sure that not only is it recovering its costs like it is today, and and able to reinvest in the facilities, but maybe it could be contributing a little bit more. We could look at that. It's just not a viable source of funds for the projects that we're talking about at this point.
Again, it's just one of many examples, and it goes to priorities, as Councillor Hanson has mentioned, because, for example, how many people in the district of North Van play golf at Northlands versus the tens of thousands of young soccer players that want to be playing soccer? I mean, priorities.
Gary did provide some preliminary numbers. He feels it is in the thousands. We've measured in that range in the past. I hesitated to provide that information tonight because he has to have a more accurate reading on that information, but we could make sure that we get that information back to you.
Appreciate
But,
that.
but Rick, you're not commenting on the fact that it's a profit center. Northlands is making us money, which is paying for all of this. You know, I just
Appreciate that, Mr. Stewart. I just think that, you know, we definitely need to have a discussion about the enterprise pieces again. So Murdo, Fraser, Northlands, Ecology Center, Maplewood Farms, and what potentials they have as profit centers and what that's going to mean in terms of upkeep and maintenance. But at the same time, I was very shocked by the numbers that were produced. I don't know how we get to $10 million for a retrofit of a kitchen and some bathrooms. And so maybe I need to have more detail on that. So that's why I was asking the question, when is that report coming back? And you said it's in the clerk's department, so you have the information? Or it's the clerk's department needs to set the date?
It's an information report, so we sent it to clerks. I believe they've received it.
We've not received it at this time, but we'll check tomorrow morning.
Okay.
We'll review that.
Yeah. That one is specifically for the $16 million in fleet replacements. So if you want us to compile it all together, we could do that too and release it as one.
That'd be good.
We have asked for the breakdown of the golf course expenditures to a greater degree. If you have that from Gary, that would be appreciated as well. Ms. Chevalier?
I have some information.
Through the mayor, yeah, I do have some information about the golf, and I think you mentioned the 9.2 that's spread out over several facilities, both Northlands as well as Murdo. So at the clubhouse at Northlands in particular, it's more like 1.8 million underway right now and into next year, which is renewal of the kitchen equipment and the washrooms in anticipation of a new restaurant operator taking over this spring, and is beginning right now, so that work is underway. There's another phase to that project regarding the electrical systems and mechanical systems as well. Then later in the plan, we just have provisions for asset management for the renewal of the pump house at Northlands, the Cook Center, and then at Murdo Fraser, again, provisions for the shop there, the caretaker home, and the turf renewal. Some of those in the later years are just provisions for systems that are at end of life, and we're assessing to determine the actual scope and timing of that work. But those are the kinds of things, it's just renewal based on the age of the facility.
And so the facility itself, I mean, we have good years and bad years there, but what's the ballpark for net revenue that we get out of that facility, just to put that circle of revenue?
Sorry, I circulated that yesterday or today.
Yeah.
It's in the range of $4 million, if I'm not mistaken.
$4 million. So we are taking revenue from it, and this is returning some of the revenue to maintain the facility.
That's correct. Yeah, and contributions to the infrastructure reserve as well. Yeah.
So just to pick up on that for a second, so some of these asset managements and the clubhouse that, you know, reaches end of life, like, could that be deferred?
We're constantly looking at our assets to make sure we're not renewing anything prematurely. In the case of Northlands Clubhouse, the kitchen renovations and the kitchen equipment, and so on is tied to the change in the operator and that new commitment. So
That's the 1.8 million?
yeah, and then the other renewals that we've looked at, they're all overdue as well in that case of the Northlands So we're constantly adjusting as we go and looking at the best time to like how to package it, how to tender it. But I think, you know, this is like what we put in the 5-year plan with regards to buildings and fleet. It's really the minimum of what we feel we need to do at this time. We've pushed out a lot of things into the outer years already, and
Fleet you're referring to now?
well, just all of our asset management projects, renewal projects, we're constantly looking at and making sure that we're not renewing anything prematurely. And given the financial constraints, we have come up with a lot of strategies to push things out where possible. So I would say what's been put in here are the things that staff strongly recommend, you know, need to continue with the best numbers that we have today, which, as we know, are continually going up. So we're constantly looking at the strategies.
Thank you. I'm gonna keep going and we'll come back, okay? Councillor Miriam?
Thank you, Mayor Little. And I think this illustrates that we need to have a different process going forward. You know, I think back to when I was first elected, and I would do the exact same thing. I was trying to address one issue by replacing it with another. And, you know, I think I couldn't agree with Councillor Hanson more. And I've talked about this in the past, that we really do need to get like we're at a very high level in this budget, and we've changed that process over a number of years. And I think that although it is defined as council's budget, you know, I think that we have to go back and just look a little bit more closely at those lines and have a better understanding of those departments. Because, you know, we're trying to respond to the public. We're trying to respond to the public's priorities, and those are our priorities. And it may not be the priority of this budget. So, and the separation of the capital and operating, I think there needs to be a time where we discuss both at the same time instead of separating them, because we're going to be talking about capital issues tonight in order to address capital issues within the community. And that's, and here we're talking about the operating budget. I do think, and Councillor Hanson, you spoke very eloquently at the start of this meeting. Thank you for your comments. You were all too correct in these very challenging times that we're facing. Certainly the tariffs that are changing daily on the news, see what's going to happen with our country and those to the south. And how they're going to affect us, and they are going to affect us. And it's something that we have to pay a close scrutiny to. What is it going to cost for future purchases? You know, we're in month 2.5 of this new administration, and it's been the most challenging time in probably our history next to wartime. And so we need to think very closely, and we need to be very open with the community as to what these costs are going to do and how they are going to impact all of us. You know, a financial plan amendment on Q2, reviewing asset utilization in line with goals, continue to adjust scope, schedule, fees and charges, paid parking, short-term rentals, inspections. You know, I'm going to have a lot to say when we are going to have the conversation about adding fees, increasing fees, paid parking on the streets, all of those things. I'm going to have a lot to say about that. Because we can't just keep nickel and diming people in the community. We have to be looking at, and I know that this is your works, you know, your passion for this work to all of staff, but sometimes I think we're just moving too fast, and we have to pull back on this, and we have to make sure that we have our house in order, that we fix the hole in the roof before we buy new furniture for the living room. And those things we have to understand clearly where we are now, where we've come from, where we are, and where we're going. And here comes the capital part of my comments. So when we're talking about, you know, the Spirit Trail, for instance, I think we have to do a review of the process for capital infrastructure projects. I think we have to go back and look at how we got to this place with the Spirit Trail. Because I think it is a good example of how we need to pivot in a new direction in regards to process. And I will say the same thing for the turf fields. You know, I drove through Sealand the other day and was thinking about the budget, but was looking at Sealand Park. And we made a commitment many, many years ago when we were going to redevelop Lower Lynn, that we were going to take out Sealand from soccer play and we were going to replace it with the new artificial turf field at Inter River. that community's almost completely built out. We've got, boy, that goes fast, doesn't it? And it's so loud, but I'm louder, so I could probably just drive through. But I'll just finish this comment and then I'll come back again there a little. You know, we did make that commitment, and of course, then we got slapped with COVID and all sorts of things that hit us, and the settling, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I do have to point out that I understand the frustration of the community, and I'm frustrated as well, because why do some things move ahead so swiftly and are completed so efficiently, and then other things are pushed back? And I say, I don't make promises to people, you know. I think we did make a commitment in the last election that we were going to build Handsworth, and from a political perspective, you and I, we've run together for many years. We had never done that before, but we've vocally made that commitment to do Handsworth. But there is a lot of give and take on a budget, and there's a lot of unforeseen situations. Atmospheric rivers, for instance, pipes that we need to put in the ground, things that we absolutely need to put in place. But I do understand the frustration, and I think there's a process that's moving along in regards to how we're going to communicate to users and our stakeholders, and how they're going to communicate back with us. Case in point, the Sport Council. How is the Sport Council going to communicate with the Rec Commission? How they're going to communicate with the two councils? You know, what changes are they making within their governance model to understand our processes? How are we going to educate them? And how are they going to educate us on how they do their consultation within their stakeholders and user groups? So I think there's lots of good things coming, but I'll leave it at that, and I'll come back for a second time, Mayor Little.
Mr. Dowling, response?
Yeah, just a couple of thoughts to share on that one. I did mention staff, in particular, our section manager financial planning, Sasha Jones, who's with us, is in the middle of implementing new systems to improve the process. And part of that is rethinking some of the processes. We've purposely split capital and operating because of the cost escalation with construction. And I think it did have an effect with council approving capital earlier. It did reduce costs. They're still going up, but likely not at the same rate that they would have otherwise been. So the point is, as we implement the new systems and we condense the process, there might be opportunities to bring it back together and still have savings. So that's something that we're definitely taking a look at. I understand the frustration with not having more information. You know, if you look at Recreation Commission, that's over $30 million enterprise. There's one line in the budget under community services. If you want to find out more about recreation, you just can't do it in this financial plan. I think it serves us well as a policy document, but for people curious about how it actually functions and what the key programs are there, you just can't see it. And so Sasha's new budget and planning system will allow that kind of interaction. Dive a little bit deeper into the details if you want. Not everybody wants to do that, but when you do, then those details should be available. So we're looking at implementing those improvements as well.
Okay, two council members haven't spoken yet. Councillor Mon.
I get it. We're in tough financial times and we need to find our way through the next couple of years in a smart, thoughtful, and responsible manner. At the same time, I feel our community is changing and our town centers are evolving. Change will occur around us whether we want it or not. And with that comes additional needs for services. I believe it's council's role to find a balance between wants and needs. I also get it that some people won't be happy with our decisions, but I think we as a council are trying to do what we feel is best for the community. I just want to make one point about deferred maintenance. I've done some work in property management, and it sometimes looks smart to defer maintenance, but it could result in higher costs in the future. Performance is impacted by the systems, and sometimes it's a tough decision, but you need to do it when you need to replace things when you need to. I will support the 5.5% budget increase as proposed by staff, but like Councillor Hanson, I am worried about that the outlook is 5.5 for the next couple of years until 2029. That's just going to be something that we got to really look at again next year. I do have an ask of staff. I would like staff to review and identify options for incorporating one gravel field conversion within the 2025-2029 capital plan. But here's the challenge to staff, but to do it without increasing the current 5-year budget. And if we can have staff report back by spring, April, May, 2025, so we can, incorporate it within our potential, amendment period. And I also want staff to look at outside funding sources and how do I make this happen, or how do I make this request of staff?
You just did.
Okay,
Well, yeah, and I mean, we could drive towards a motion, and then I would seek a follow-up motion. I mean, the challenge is that, so we want to set the envelope so staff can move forward and prepare the bylaws. What Mr. Downlock has presented, that there are other opportunities along the way to make changes, including there's going to be a mini budget update, most likely in both July and September possibly. We really want to spend 90% of our time making sure we know what we're going to be doing in the next calendar year. Some of the stuff that's in the outer years, we've got room and time to sort out. So if we were talking about an AT field conversion piece, that's unlikely to occur before 2027, even if we prioritized it. And so it's not like it's imminent, and it's not within this calendar year or this budget year. So we can still have staff report back on that at a future meeting at that point, not change the envelope now, and then they can prepare the bylaws to go forward at this time. Is that fair, Mr. Demo?
That works for us, and if we were to consider options with construction likely in 2027, it could be brought back in the future. You could specify a timeline for us to do that.
So if that was the scenario we're contemplating, then I would recommend you pass, and I can come back for a follow-up motion that encapsulates them coming back with strategies to prioritize gravel field conversion at a future meeting.
Our financial position will be much clearer when we get to the budget outlook in July, so everyone's aware.
Stuff that's in this 1 year,
yeah.
we got to be pretty clear about with staff. Yeah.
I think there's some opportunities to look at, potential reallocations within this budget, depending on what happens with 7 Acre Spirit Trail. So, how do we make a decision about the McCartney Bridge? Is that approved then?
No.
No.
It's not approved.
But it's within the budget envelope.
We've given direction.
Okay. Well, let's be clear. We have engineering present. You have had authorization to pursue the grants.
No, they didn't get authorization, but they, excuse me? It was,
Well,
there were
that's-
6 of us in the meeting.
Sorry, that would be, I'm going to get that from staff.
Okay.
Peter.
Yeah, so following the last council workshop we had, we received consensus to move forward with the application. Upon further review, we did not require a follow-up council endorsement, and council advised of that. Staff had submitted their application to the federal government. We have not heard back. It's too soon for us to get back. There's no commitment for us to move forward with it at this point in time. But we have got the funding. So it's
But is that the only thing holding you back, or will you be coming, you have another decision point to come back to the council even if funding is secured?
Yes, Miller, we need to come back and have a discussion in terms, we talked about the alignment, and then we're going to have a conversation about facility type. So there is still more discussion.
While we had given direction on alignment through the Windridge section, we hadn't given any direction on alignment further east from that point.
And the bridge is in.
It's right on the edge of that Windridge alignment.
It's in the Windsor Park.
So I'm a little confused. Is the bridge?
It's not being pursued unless they come back to council and get specific approval to go ahead with that project. Nice loud voice, Peter.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
And that, at what point would that occur?
Through the mayor, we know that in terms of the outcome of the grant application, that's really the key litmus test in terms of is the bridge on the table or not, because it's critical in this funding to realise that.
So if you get the grant, what happens?
Yeah, as we shared with the mayor, we'll be coming back to council to have more discussions anyway on that whole segment in terms of facility type and treatment. So we still need to have more discussions with council before we shall address.
So potentially, if we get the grant or we don't get the grant, it still comes back to council to decide if we want to go ahead with the bridge up at McCartney Creek. And if the decision by council is maybe there's another route that will still achieve continuing the Spirit Trail, but without incurring a $7 million bridge, potentially there's some funding available.
Yeah, so through the mayor, a couple of pieces on that element. We've gone ahead and applied for a grant application. If we choose not to proceed with the bridge, there is a reputational risk for the district because we've secured funding from the federal government. And if we about face, there is that risk reputationally from that. And then in terms of the funding that becomes available from the bridge, the majority of that $7 million number that we've talked about is assumed to come from external parties. So of the $7 million, we're only talking about a couple of $1 million that is actually the district's funding component of it. So that would all that would be made available. If that wasn't to go ahead, we had to reallocate to other items.
But to be clear, if you did pick a new route, you would have about $2 million net to build the new route. And so it's not that you would just have additional funds available that you could assign to another project necessarily. You would not have the grant approved for necessarily for an alternate route. Is that fair?
Correct.
Yeah. Councilor Mossel, you still look like you have something else to say. Otherwise, I'm happy to move along.
It's been
I'll come back.
Okay. All right. First time speakers, Councilor Back. I think you had your hand up before.
Sure, I can try to go. So I agree with lots of the comments around the table. These budgets are getting more and more difficult as we are, looking to try to address all the priorities that we're hearing from the community. And, it does often become pitting one capital project up against another, and that becomes challenging as well because all of these things that we've identified as community priorities are priorities that we hear. I haven't heard a lot of talk about climate action around the table. Councilor Murray, you mentioned the atmospheric river, but I think there's so much unpredictability in terms of the investments that we're going to need to make in terms of responding to climate. We had a atmospheric river in the forecast just this past weekend. Thankfully, it didn't really amount to much in the way of damage or anything, but certainly, the October event did, and I think we can expect to see more of those types of events. So that's another piece that just adds to the uncertainty, and I think we need to be planning for those kind of projects as well. Culvert upgrades, we've heard from Deep Cove obviously was hit the hardest in October, but Lynn Valley as well. There's a significant project there that will need to move forward at some point. Otherwise we're going to just see more challenges as we get more severe weather events. In terms of, we do end up talking about the capital projects in these discussions, and I know that's the tangible. They're the tangible ones that the community sees and wants to see finished. I think the artificial turf fields have been a challenge. I can understand the frustration when people see these projects in a 5-year plan and then they get delayed, they get deferred, and that's happened time and time again. And so I can appreciate the frustration, and I would support Councillor Ma's suggestion that we look at incorporating one of those gravel field conversions in the 5-year plan. And we know that none of these projects get less expensive over time. They only go up, and it's incredible to see some of the cost escalations that we've seen. But field use, that is something that the majority of our community, anyone with young kids, certainly benefits from. And if we want to be a community that's for young families, which I know we do, we're going to have to really see those investments happen. So I do support that. Yeah, I think those are my initial comments.
Thank you. Councillor Forbes?
Thank you. A lot of what the points I had made have been said, but first off, I just want to say 5.5% I'm for this year, but it's definitely not sustainable going forward. And we are only tricking ourselves if we believe that we can get another 2 or 3 years of 5.5. We can't. And as you started this workshop, I think you started out by saying there's no extra funding and we'll need to borrow to do anything. So that's always in the back of my mind because that's a cost, again, the borrowing cost. So do you borrow in order to put 10 million into a kitchen and washrooms, or do you try to maintain it so that it lives a little bit longer? That's just an example. I'm not saying specifically that one. And the liquid waste, I read that by the end of 2029, it'll be tripling within 5 years, it's going to be tripling. So, I mean, costs are going to continue to go up. We can't stay at 5.5, and we've subsidized things in order to get down to 5.5. We've drawn down reserves, we've gone to borrowing, we've done what we can to get to 5.5. So I just really want to stress, we can only do what we can afford. And we do a disservice to our citizens if we just think, oh, well, we need this, so we'll go out and borrow another $20 million. Sometimes delays, I mean, we all know it's sitting in this room right now, and sometimes I get frustrated when comments are made to the effect that, oh, well, this council just delayed it. No, you know, we're all working for the citizens. We're all trying to get you what you want. Sometimes we just can't for whatever reasons. And so it's not like we're trying to work as a team. At least I'm trying to work as a team to get there. It doesn't mean I'm going out of my way to delay stuff. Financially, there's some really super changing environments. We've had the COVID changed our environment, changed our funding, changed what we were able to do, and some things got moved. We've had climate change in the last year. We've really experienced what that means, and we've only got $16 million in the budget over 5 years for climate change. That's insane. I mean, it's got to be a lot higher than that. So I don't even see sometimes we're not budgeting where we should budget, and I think the climate change number should be higher, but I don't know how we would get it higher now. And now the whole issue with the United States and the tariffs, and they're in 1 hour and they're out the next hour, and then this is in next day, and maybe I'll cancel it, and maybe it'll be in April. That just leads to indecision, insecurity. That's going to affect our businesses. That's going to affect them not wanting to hire, not wanting to expand, not wanting to sort of advance their business because they don't know what's going to happen to them. So we need council. I always think of us as sort of a fallback in some ways, as best we can. We're a backstop, just like in COVID, where we, looked past regulations and extended sidewalks for patios to try and get small businesses to have more revenue. That's the kind of thinking we might need to do for a number of years here, depending on what happens. One of the other thing is I've been asking for a long time for the asset-like utilization, and I will quit and come back to that.
Rick was saved by the bell, is that what that was?
Have you got a button under here?
All right, I've got, we've gone through first-time speakers, so I've got Councillor Murray, Councillor Hanson. Councillor Murray, go ahead.
Yeah, it is frustrating, and I'm glad council is, talking about the future and how we're going to address these unsustainable numbers going forward. Certainly we keep, pounding at the table at Metro to look at, and we've got some meetings coming up with them to answer more of our questions and look at, and Metro's going to be embarking on their budget process as well, to look at the capital within Metro Vancouver, and I think that's where the fat is and where we can have some real impact, although there's some that don't believe there's any fat left. But there's going to be a very robust discussion. But I do have to say, I am frustrated by the comments of our, by Mr. Cohen in regards to, you know, the flexibility with this grant application. And I would have to say that it was hardly unanimous. When we were discussing it, the mayor was not in attendance, so there were 6 of us. And I think my comment that you can apply for the grant and then not use it was confirmed by staff that evening. Exactly was what was said. When I made that comment, that we can simply apply for it, but if we don't want to use it, we don't. You know, in times of financial uncertainty, and certainly that uncertainty has been coming since COVID, that is when financial uncertainty began because the world stopped. And then to begin embarking, you know, mere years later on looking at the original cost of the Spirit Trail, I understand was pegged at $40 million. That was the platinum model. And then we got it down to 20. And then further, we've reduced it by 15. And that was the section between Riverside and Deep Cove. And it is the most geographically challenged part of the Spirit Trail through the district of North Vancouver. So to be embarking and actually, you've got to be kidding. No, we're at 2 minutes now. It's budget. I want another 2. Everybody that wants 4 minutes again, put up your hand. Excellent. See, there we go. Yeah, 4 minutes. So
Wait a minute.
I'm okay with it. I just want to make sure that we're
It's a
asking
workshop.
questions, clearing up confusion about things.
Well, I'm
We're
trying
not
to,
just-
I'm trying to clear up confusion about why, if we're so concerned since COVID about costs, why we're embarking on single route options and the kind of money that is, you know, a significant chunk of our capital budget. When we've just installed for $100,000 a bike lane all the way down the parkway. I really have a challenge with that. And now I'm being told if we don't go ahead with this project for a 89-meter bridge, which is the length of a football field, over McCartney Creek, where both one of the major stakeholders, the Wild Bird Trust, and the school district, who I contacted last week, who have not had any conversation in some time, was the comment back from staff in regards to the alignment of the Spirit Trail. Why we are now going to have reputational damage if we decide not to go ahead with a bridge, in my opinion, to nowhere. It is a bridge to a road up a hill that has to cross, the route would have to cross no less than 30 driveways on Plymouth. I've walked it multiple times, I've filmed it. I've climbed into the bush to look at the span. And there's been a lot of discussion about this, a lot of questions. And now I'm being told by staff that if this doesn't go through, I'm going to be impacted by reputation damage. Well, I don't think there was a clear voice or understanding of the impact of putting this bridge there. And I think there are alternatives. And I think that if that had been indeed a concern, staff, they should have said it that night a few weeks ago when we were in chamber and talking about it. If you don't support this, if you don't endorse this, you will have marked yourself with reputational damage. We have a pitting one project against another, and I'm so tired of it. I'm so done with that kind of model. I want to make good decisions that we can afford, and decisions that the community supports, and not pit one group against another. And I think this project is way too rich. It's been way too rich from the beginning. And my other frustration, and I'll end here, Mayor Little, was that we got one option, one route, one alignment, one choice. And the community battled multiple times. And now I feel like council is having to battle as well. And I don't want to do that. I don't want to fight about this. I want to make good decisions because they make sense. Not because we have a grant floating out there and we have a chance to get some money. This is a $15 million project. I've talked to engineering about it. It's a $7 million bridge, period. It's, you know, it's a $7 million bridge. There's money on the other side from outside sources, or there's another way that we can look at this. But I think we have too many issues that we're trying to address. And I think we have to find a middle ground and a balance so we can look at a gravel field conversion. So we can look at a connection with existing trails and not have to pit one group against another and not have to absorb reputational damage. I've never heard that. That's the first I've ever heard, and I'm very frustrated by it.
In all fairness, though, you know, I mean, it's the reason why a lot of grants actually do ask for a council motion before they.
And we didn't have one.
Is because they want to make sure that it has a high likelihood of going through to completion. Otherwise, they'll put the funds in other projects that are more likely. I definitely think that we should work with the granting agencies and see what flexibility we have. It's focused on active transportation was the goal, and maybe it can be applied to other projects, but.
Or
I
another
don't
alternative
think
route.
I don't think what Mr. Cohen was saying was revolutionary in any sense. We've had that before where we get grants that are approved and so then you have to decide, you're looking at 40-cent dollars, 30-cent dollars, and you're going to say no to it. I mean, if not reputational damage with the granting agency, you still have to consider what damage, you know, the community is going to look at a project and go, but you had the money for that. But so at this point, though, I think we've had it clarified from Mr. Cohen already that that project's not proceeding without council check-in on it. And so that's fine. It's still in our hands to decide what to do with it. Councillor Hanson, you were the next one speaker.
Thank you very much, and thank you everyone for their comments around this table. I was at the point in my remarks, in my when I was speaking earlier, when I was saying I would not support ongoing increases of 5.5%. In my view, given the certain times in which we live, the economic pressures in which all of us are under at the moment, our residents deserve a more moderated rate of tax growth going forward. And I look forward to working out financial models. And as I say, I think council needs to be more involved in the process by which we work out these financial models that will return tax increases to the historical 3%, with at least 1% of that being allocated to the infrastructure deficit. And I'm prepared to say today that if this requires cuts to capital projects and to services, so be it. At this stage, given the times in which we live, I don't believe we have any choice of proceeding to be fair to our residents on a sustained basis. With that in mind, a support that I believe we may need to consider providing to our residents is a district-created, a district-led deferral program for utilities. And I would like to see how that could be costed. Presumably it would be, could be done on a neutral basis because we would get back the interest that we're charging, and that would be the interest that we would incur. But I don't believe we're going to see a utility deferral program sponsored by the government, the provincial government, in the near term. So that's a support that I would like to see us contemplate in relation to district residents. Do support Councillor Maw's amendment, one gravel field conversion. However, it has to be on the understanding, as was specified by Councillor Maw, that it is achieved through reallocations and not through increasing the total capital budget. And I think those comments, with those comments, I think I've communicated my views on this budget, and perhaps more importantly, changes that I'd like to see to the process going forward, whereby we're more involved, we're more hands-on in terms of the allocation and reallocation process, and whereby we drive back to a 3% tax increase with at least 1% of that being for infrastructure. Thank you.
I don't know if it got shared out with council today, but I received a letter late last week from the province on the issue of deferrals. So that should be in your inbox if you haven't yet. But
Yes, I read that.
okay, yeah, good. I wasn't sure if it had been circulated yet.
No appetite for it.
Yeah.
Okay, I think I saw Councillor back.
I just wanted to touch on something like Councillor Ma talked about, partnerships, and we need to be looking at more creative ways to fund some of these things. We are so reliant on property taxes. I think we need to be looking at partnering with other municipalities on the North Shore when we're planning facilities. rec facilities as an example. We built Delbrook, the city's building Harry Jerome. We should have been, working together more closely to make sure that we're building facilities that are complementing, or encompassing more user groups when those facilities are used by district residents, just like they are city residents. There's really, no borders there. And I think as we look to the future, I think we're gonna have to look at more collaboration on new types of facilities, different ways to fund as well. A sponsorship policy is something that still hasn't come to this council. I think we will be looking at that, and I hope we will. Because I think there's room for that in our community as well in different ways to fund some of these sorts of projects. So we're going to have to get more creative on all levels. I also support sort of that line by line review or a zero-based budgeting approach, which we've never done, but I'd like to be part of something like that where we're looking at everything that we're spending on, because we're way too reliant on these property taxes, and to see 5.5% year after year is not something that I'm prepared to support either, knowing the impact that it's having on every household across the district. So, comment.
Thank you. Mr. Daniluk, response?
Yeah, I just wanted to remind council that we did start a process this year with staff to identify all the opportunities that we could early on in the summer. And that went through a process where we prioritized those opportunities, which resulted in the savings this year. There's a long list of other options that have been identified that might be viable that we're pursuing. And so we're working on being more innovative, and we'll also be bringing back that sponsorship policy through the Finance and Audit Committee first before introducing it to council.
That's great. Thank you.
Councillors Pope and Forbes. Councillor Pope.
Thank you very much. I would just like to emphasize that what I was suggesting earlier is exactly what Councillor Ma has stated, which is to look at the options in the capital plan for funding gravel field conversions. That is what my suggestion was. Thank you very much for putting it into a motion. But I would like to see it like broader, a little broader, to provide, like other options, like where money could be shifted from some capital plan projects to, if it's not just one gravel field conversion, possibly 2 gravel field conversions. I would like to see that the field houses be reduced, basically the bathrooms at soccer fields be reduced in cost by looking at how much it would cost instead to put public access to Hansworth High School washrooms instead of putting a field house out there. Like, to me, these are very tangible things, and yeah, we don't want to be doing this, going forward, although I do think what you say, that we need more of a hands-on especially when we're talking about projects that are like 5 million here and 10 million there. So can it, or would you be okay, Councillor Long, with like just broadening the amendment a little bit to include, just to give us a bit of a range, a little more flexibility with where, some money could come from to go into whatever.
I'm happy to, provide time when you propose the motion to have discussions specifically about the motion. That would make sense to me. Yeah.
Do we need a motion at a
Can't we just
workshop?
give direction to staff to bring that back?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why do we have to
Mr.
have a
Daniluk,
workshop?
do you have additional comments?
I just wanted to remind council, with obviously over the 5 years, we've balanced the budget as it is right now, and there is no additional funding, so we could look at reallocation. We'll also already be looking at additional savings due to the tariffs, and we haven't had a look at the 10-year plan, which is a significant amount in decline. And so the 10-year plan, so there's already been projects pushed out into the outer years, and we do need to bring that back. And so to the mayor's point earlier, these ATFs won't be likely constructed, or an ATF wouldn't likely be constructed until 2027. So we don't have to rush this decision. I certainly would like to bring back information on where we are within the 10-year plan, so council has that information to consider over the course of this year. It's not a small problem. What we're looking at today over the next 5 years is our small problems. We have a very large problem in the outer years of the plan.
Mr. Stewart, additional comments?
Yeah, just a brief one. We can try to accommodate everything that council wants us to do. But we've got some financial constraints and we've got some uncertainty constraints. And I would just like us to be patient with our resolutions in the sense of determining things as opposed to asking us to explore opportunities to do other things. Because the constraints we're facing right now, and the uncertainty we're facing right now is really, really, for lack of a better word, crazy. And so we can look at all this stuff, but the flexibility we have right now is really, really constrained.
So, I understand that. Yep. Councillor Forbes, and but it's, like I said, when you're prepared to put forward your motion, I'll give more time for the discussion about the motion at that time, but I'm just going to continue on the motion that's in the package first. Councillor Forbes.
Are you putting it forward now?
Oh, go ahead.
Just to continue on then, that asset, like the asset like annualization, finance and audit are supposed to get it next month, but I have to say, I asked for that from Andy before Andy left. And I've been asking you, and I keep getting kind of, for lack of a better word, deferred. But I also think that that's something that council really needs to see before we get into this capital, and we would have a better understanding of the asset life and how many assets and what we're looking at.
Absolutely.
So I would hope, I mean, I'm going to get this next month, but I would, and all council will eventually see it, but I would hope that it would come forward sooner before we get into the budget discussions next year. And if you can even give us a halfway through the year view, sort of in the fall. I don't know, you can work out the details, but I just think we'd benefit if council had that brought to them sooner. Also, the drill down, I've been asking for the drill down and I haven't gotten it yet. So last I heard from you was that by July, we should be able to, everybody, including the public, should be able to go on and there'll be a dashboard and we can drill down. I don't know how far you're gonna let us drill down, but.
I would love it to be July, but the project that Sasha's working on doesn't complete until the end of July, so it'll be ready for next year's budget cycle, and I would say in the fall next year.
Okay, but, and the public will have access to that, and do you have any idea how far we're gonna be able to drill down? Because once you ask me, well, just ask me the questions and I'll sit and answer them for you, and I've said, well, if I don't see the data, I can't ask the question.
We can bring that back to council. It's a public-facing tool,
Okay,
so we should be able to determine the level that we want to get down to.
okay, thank you. And I do agree with what you said, that I think as much as some people may not really be into doing it, I think it's a necessity in this job now with what all the circumstances we face, that we do, council takes a good line-by-line view of what they're doing. Not under pressure of deadlines or anything, but we need to do that. We need to understand it, because when the public comes to us and asks us questions, we need to be able to explain it. And so much of that stuff that's down here that council doesn't see is very, very detailed, and then we can't explain it. So I think that doing a line-by-line exercise at some point, maybe in the fall, so you'll be under pressure then too. Whenever you're not under pressure, I would back that too.
Mr. Dallin, your response to that?
I just want to emphasize, I completely agree that having sort of more time and space to talk about these issues before we get into the process In the fall, absolutely, very helpful. So we have the finance and audit meetings in April, we have another one in July, and we have a scheduled budget outlook meeting with council in July as well. So we'll have lots of opportunities to bring back better information, and come the fall, we'll have new ways of sharing that information so people can access the budget at the level that makes the most sense for them.
Great.
And I was just gonna say that, that asset list, if I understand correctly from what you've asked for, it doesn't change very frequently. It's over long construction periods that you see significant change. So you don't need like mid-year updates on it necessarily. What they can produce this year will largely be still the case next year because they work in such long time horizons on it.
And the asset's written off at a certain percentage, so if you see it 1 year, you know that percentage is, it's gonna be lowered for the next year. So you're right, it's not something that's time consuming, once a year would be good.
There are some significant strategies that we can consider once we've got that new baseline presented. So we look forward to bringing those back.
Thank you.
Mr. Stewart has an additional comment. Mr. Stewart?
Yeah, I think we have to be very careful at the end of the day about what our expectations are about how we can deal with individual members of the public and provide them with information. I'm just being really, pragmatic about this. If our expectation is that every question that's going to be asked by a member of the public, we're going to be able to answer, it's not going to happen. I'm just telling you that. We can't do it, and it's too much. So I'm just being really pragmatic about this. I really respect Councillor Forbes' comment about the need to have information, but we need to be able to do this in such a way that's practical for the organization. And I don't know that we can provide always all the information that everybody wants to have about every decision that we're making.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that, it sounds good to say we're gonna pursue zero-based budgeting line by line on everything. There needs to be a minimum threshold. We obviously don't want the council sitting and discussing how much of a paper purchase we're doing over the next year. We want to be able to do it at a level that makes sense for us. So there's a minimum threshold of materiality that is of interest to us. But that being said, I think you're hearing very clearly from the council that we want to dig in at a deeper level next year. And it sounds like we have some tools that'll help support us along the way. Councillor Forbes?
I just wanted to also say that a comment about the rec centers that you mentioned about us sharing. The problem in the past has been, and I won't say who on what side, but the district has far more rec centers than the city, and the host where the rec center is built pays the largest, pays for the capital, and then we share the operating cost. So I don't think the city's going to buy on to paying for capital for rec centers in the district when we have so many more, but it's worth a shot. The other thing I just wanted to ask, do I understand correctly, Rick, that asset tax, that 1%, it's going to go up to, or it's scheduled so far, to go to 1.5 in 2027?
That's correct. The council has always looked at addressing the infrastructure deficit over a 10-year period, and moving to that 1.5% in 2027 gets us closer to that.
So are you expecting that by 2029, it's going to be going to 2%?
No, it's 1.5% all the way out to 2034.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Stewart, additional response?
Just for council's information, we have discussed the restructuring of the rec commission accounts for 10 years. And I really see an opportunity in the next year or two to actually restructure that. And for the first time, I'm seeing a very positive response from the city about the willingness to look at that. So I just want to be really careful about the fact that we may have criticisms of the differences, But we actually have a relationship right now with the city, which I want to take advantage of in the next year to actually restructure the Recreation Commission accounts. And we're going to be pursuing that. And I just wanted to let you know that we actually have some very positive comments from the city about the willingness to do that.
Thank you. Councilor Murray, additional comments?
Just a couple of comments based on some of the things that have been brought up. Councillor Hanson talked about the deferment of the utility and the province has declined. West Van is doing it. There was a story in the newspaper about West Vancouver doing it. I think the difference between West Vancouver and ourselves and the city is they have no industry. And industry and commercial can't defer. Residential can defer, but industry and commercial can't defer. And I think that's where.
Well, even residential can't defer, but they created a special levy that did qualify.
If you're
But they
55
had to
and older.
choose to have it entirely borne by the residential class, whereas in our system, we'd actually have to significantly increase the residential classes pie in order to be able to give them the special advantage of being able to defer. And so we have to significantly raise how much they have to pay during the course of the levy in order to give them more flexibility on deferring for the 12% of our community that defers.
And
so
there's
that was the trade-off.
And then West Van's is a special levy in the sense that they're going to add the cost of the utility to the property taxes. So you get to decide whether you want to pay the utility or you want to have it added to your property taxes and then you defer that whole sum. So it won't be across the board in West Vancouver. There will be some that just choose to pay the utility and then others that don't want to or can't afford to. So they'll defer it because they either have young children, they have children with a disability, or they're 55 years and older, which is the requirements under the Provincial Deferment Act. You know, and Jordan's comment about, you know, being more creative and finding ways other than property taxes. I think the harsh perspective that is coming our way is that the federal government sees us as paying some of the lowest taxes in the country. You know, I think Halifax is 12%, but it doesn't cost. You know, it costs $255,000 to buy a house in Halifax. You know, you can't get a door for $255,000 in this province. So, you know, I think what's going to get really frightening is that the provincial government's going to say, oh, well, you know, you want that transit, it's going to have to go on your property tax. It's going to be based on your assessment. And we've had those conversations over the years, and we've always pushed back. We've always pushed back. We've always pushed back. And so far, we've been successful. I don't know how successful we're going to be in the future. I think a lot of this downloading that started 25 years ago, 30 years ago is ramping up. It's only going to get worse because they see that our property taxes are certainly not the highest in this country. However, if you compare it to our the cost of living, it is astronomical for us to be able to absorb any more of these costs. And you know, I don't know what choice we have other than to pull back. We are in North Vancouver very fortunate, and even in the region, with the inventory of services that we provide and infrastructure we provide. I mean, we have world-class mountain biking. We have, you know, some of the most modern rec facilities in the region. We have 3 mountains in our backyard. We have rivers. You can ski, play golf, and kayak on the same day in the District of North Vancouver. You know, minutes from your door. And, you know, I really think that we have to understand and appreciate the inventory of what we've got and really, you know, think about, are we going to add more of it in this very stressful time? Or are we going to make sure that we can fund the things that we need to fund? And climate change keeps coming up because of the experiences that we've had with these atmospheric rivers and these changing events that we've seen. And how are we going to deal with that? You know, how are we going to plan for that? Is it responsible for us to go and spend tens of millions of dollars on wants versus planning for uncertainty and the needs and the uncertainty of what the next party that forms government in this country? What are they going to say to us, given how we're, you know, the situation with the U.S. and the situation around the world? So I really think that we have to be as prudent as possible, and I do think in this time where, you know, we're probably the most patriotic group of people in this country that we've been in a long time. We have been brought together by this very unfortunate leader, in my opinion, in the South. So if there's a silver lining, there it is. But I think people will understand in a different way if things become challenging. The tariffs are going to add extra cost to everything that we bring into this country. And how is that going to affect us going forward with our infrastructure, with things that we've ordered, purchasing artificial turf fields, fire trucks, garbage trucks, the buses that TransLink is ordering? What is that going to cost? What is it going to look like? And how long is this going to go on? And will it be reversed with the next administration? We don't know. So those are a lot of really, really big questions. And I think we have some big discussions, and I think the best way to do it is to be as clear and transparent and honest and upfront with our community as we can be, and meet with our stakeholders on a regular basis, and have more discussions like this so we have a better idea as to what's coming as well. I get that it's your job, but it's our job as well, and we all have to be on the same page.
Yes, and I'm going to come to you next, Councillor Pope. I would like us to start moving towards the direction. So just as a reminder, on page 13 of the package at the bottom, there's a motion and a potential follow-up, which I think Councillor Ma, you could potentially massage the wording of that follow-up to include revisiting some of the capital priorities. But that's where I kind of want us to be moving towards shortly. Councillor Pope, comments, please.
Yeah, I think we've heard consensus about point number 1 there, that we want to move towards a 5.5% property tax increase this year. That seems done to me. I'm really glad to hear everyone or others around this table talking about climate change and the high costs we're going to be facing in the future, as I've been talking about it for months since this budget first fell onto our table. And 16 million over 5 years is not going to be enough. And we really need to plan for more of that. So where is that going to come from? Some of the suggestions that Councillor Back has been making are good. I would like us, as part of our future discussions, to look at things like, or maybe this could be part of the options that you come back with, Mr. Danelik, on the capital plan shifts, which is like looking at profits from Northlands Golf Course and other enterprise operations, and reallocating that money, instead of reinvesting it into washrooms at Northlands Golf and, you know, a kitchen upgrade, to be reallocated from those reserve funds into another, into capital funding, so that we can, you know, provide more money for climate change and climate remediation in the future. And so I think that Councillor Ma's suggestion again is to broaden it out from just asking for options to convert one gravel field, to instruct staff to provide options to reallocate funding to provide gravel field conversions, and also look at profits from Northlands and other enterprise operations to be reallocated from reserve funds into capital.
Right, so I'm going to put the first part on the floor. So I'm going to move the first paragraph. Is there a seconder for the first paragraph? Second by Councillor Back. I think we've had a pretty good discussion on the concepts of that, so I'm prepared to call the question on the first paragraph. All those in favor? Contrary minded? The motion is carried. You're approved to bring forward the bylaws for preparation for our full consideration at regular meeting council. Councillor Ma, you've had some advice on what we all want on different aspects of it. Do you have your preferred wording for the second piece?
I do, but may I ask a question?
Yeah.
Is there consensus about the income or the revenue from other
Enterprise operations is how we refer to it.
That's usually what
Just ask staff to report back on reallocation to accommodate gravel artificial turf field. Reallocation. Simple.
Well, that's one piece of
That's
it.
only one piece. So do we have consensus on including this other piece?
It doesn't,
Which would be to report back on reallocating from the enterprise operations
no.
profits to being moved into,
Sorry.
I want to know what you have to say about that.
Generally, when the enterprise operations have been brought back, we had a look at how finances are managed, how they might be improved, a number of them returned to the land income reserve, which helps us preserve the value of the lands in the district when council wants to acquire properties. So that's one part of it. There are other enterprise operations which do make some profit, but not much profit. They've been looked at many times over the years. So we could take a look at them, but I don't expect that to make it a large change the way you're probably envisioning. I'm just giving you my advice on that. When we bring it back, I don't expect there to be too much there.
Sounds like it's.
Right. I don't know that I want to completely tie the revenues to something specific at this point. Right now, it comes back into our general revenue, or does it get automatically directed to
No, it's.
land?
Most of the income generating properties, for example, through the real estate office, get returned to the land income reserve, where to provide council flexibility in acquiring lands, our most valuable asset.
So I don't think you have a total consensus on that. I'd rather keep it much more specific to deal with the capital plan issues that we talked about tonight that we want to deal with imminently.
So
whether we're going to prioritize the AT gravel conversion and look to multiple other projects as sources of ways to get there, whether it is deferring the washrooms project or the kitchen project or others. I just don't want to automatically say that, now and going forward in the future that we're redirecting money automatically. But I think it's
That makes sense to me. That provides options. That's basically what's at the core of it, to come back with other options so we can fund gravel field conversions and have, other ways to fund the high cost and impact of climate change.
I see Mr. Stewart has an additional comment.
Yeah, just a very brief one. I don't want to conflate the relationships between Maplewood Children's Farm, the Ecology Center, and Northlands without everybody understanding really the interactions between the two. And Northlands is making a real profit, and that may be transferred to something else, but I would really like to separate the review of the independent operations, because we've done this. We did this before. Lisa, remember, we did this for 10 years ago, and we're really concerned about the fact that they were losing money. And in fact, all of the centers, Maplewood, Ecology Center, and Northlands, have all turned their operations around to be making money. So I just want to be really careful about interfering with that, because that's been a real transference in municipal operations. And so I'm welcome to do that, but I just want you to understand that we've made a real effort to change the way that they view themselves, the way they look at themselves, and what they're trying to do. So I'm really careful.
That's fair, Mr. Stewart. I think I'm the one who originally lumped the enterprise group together specifically. But I know for most of its years, Murdo Fraser, the only thing that made money at Murdo Fraser was the pot machine. So I get that we can't all characterize them as significant revenue generators. Having said that, I think the point was to open up the potential sources to be redirected into completion of the other projects. Do you have a sense for how you'd like to say that, or would you like assistance from the clerk on that, or?
I have proposed something.
Let's hear it.
Okay. Without increasing the current 5-year budget, staff are directed to review and identify by spring 2025 options to include one gravel field conversion within the 2025 to 2029 capital plan that includes partnerships and external funding sources.
Second.
I think you're almost there to get unanimous consent if you say, and also present options for a future second AT gravel conversion and.
Or just leave it gravel field conversions, don't put a number on it, don't put 1 or 2.
At least one.
That's right.
At least one.
At
There you go.
least one.
There you go. Okay.
Question?
Moved by Councillor Ma, second by Councillor Murray. Any other discussion on that?
Question?
Just wanted to make sure, you guys want to rush now? The clerk-
It's not 5 to 8, it's 5 to 9.
Oh, shoot. You're good. Okay, prepared to call the question. All in favor? Contrary minded, motion is carried. Thank you very much, Councillor. So we try to keep 10 minutes of time at the end of a council workshop for comments from the public. Just before I get there, just double check with Mr. Stewart. Do you have any updates you'd like to provide?
No, not at this point. This has been a very interesting council meeting, so we'll leave it at that.
There you go. Okay, good enough. All right, so we do have 3 people that signed up to speak, and we do provide an opportunity for up to 10 minutes of speaking at the end of a council workshop. So each will be given 3 minutes to speak. And so I'll call on Stuart Nitz first.
What would you like to speak?
Right there.
Just nice and loud.
Yeah.
Stuart, that's the microphone for the room for the online people, so just check to that and you're probably good.
Okay. So thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council, for the opportunity to speak. I've heard the term frustration tonight a lot around the room. And that's great, because you have no idea how frustrated we as a soccer and sports community have been over the last 12 years in terms of what's happened. It's very interesting to hear Councillor Murray's comments about Sealand in 2014, because there may be not a lot of people who were on council at that time, but that was an agreement that was made with Sports Council, whereby monies that would come in from developers would go towards Inter-River. I have no idea where that money went. No idea, because I don't believe that it went into the Inter-River budget, so to speak. And so there have been lots of instances over the years where we have been really frustrated. I would like to remind council that when this last discussion took place about the budget and the 2 gravel conversions were included, there was an amended motion on the floor to transfer $5 million from a 3rd field into the Spirit Trail. And that was a compromise, and we were happy to go with that because we felt that we were getting 2 fields. And so for us to then find in this latest rendition that there are no fields, you can imagine the kind of frustration. There was an email that hit your email boxes today. I'm going to pass you copies of this if you'd like. And actually, Rick, you actually got a mention, so if you'd like to pass that around, so you can have a copy here too. By the way, when I first started doing all of this, I used to have a head of hair like yours. And,
No, you didn't.
Yeah, I did. Maybe that was when I got married.
There you go.
But I don't need that right now, but that is a brilliant summary from a district resident about what has happened over the last few years. And it's really important to understand it, because we're at a place right now where, as a club, we increased our membership 10% last. We have 3,500 boys and 1,000 adults. We increased our membership 10% last year. This year, year on year, we're trending 16.5% up. That's 16.5 over 10%. We have nowhere to put these kids, absolutely nowhere. We're putting 96 kids onto William Griffin in an evening. 96. We have 120 kids on a field in the summer in the camps. They're little ones, and so they can accommodate them. But if you have 12, 13, 14-year-old boys trying to run around in a space this big, it's just asking for problems. And I think there was a comment the other night on local TV by Barry DeLay. He said North Vancouver, I don't know if any of you saw it, he said North Vancouver has the healthiest people in the lower mainland. And why is that? Because we're always outside, walking dogs, biking, running, playing soccer, playing baseball, playing basketball, whatever it is. And I really want the council to take heed of that. And I want to thank you for the conversation tonight, but please do not defer this to the back end of the 5-year plan. It's great that you've mentioned it and that it's brought up and that the motion's been passed, but I really want to encourage you to make this happen sooner and not later.
For your comments. Zosia Brown?
Zosha?
Zosha?
Good evening, Mayor Little, council members, and staff. I'm here, my name is Zosha, I'm here representing North Shore Girls Soccer Club on behalf of the channel and the board. And I'm also a district resident and a mom of 2. Both our kids have played with NBFC and SGSC for 5 years, and my husband's been coaching for 3. And as Stuart has alluded to, we have over 6,000 kids and 1,000 adults playing soccer in North Van and sharing just 7 turfs amongst all those players. That demand for playing on the fields is only going to go up, population growth. And just to give a personal example, my 10-year-old son's NBFC practiced on gravel for the better part of last year. The surface is super unforgiving, puddles and divots roll quickly, kids roll ankles and fall very easily. It's super unsafe, the field freezes quickly, practice gets canceled faster than any other ATM fields. Once his team upgraded to the Argyle turf for practice, this was shared with at least 6 or 7 other teams, which picture loose balls constantly flying between teams, coaches having to chase those balls down. It's nearly impossible to run practice in these circumstances. North Shore Girls is fortunate that we have invested in the bubble, which came to life in 2011. That's kept over 700 youth and per year off gravel and given them a better early development playing experience, but that is now at capacity. And our board is looking likely that we may need to move our U8s to gravel this coming year to accommodate growth. As it's been discussed, we've heard from many members, multiple fields have been promised, planned, and late, including Argyle, Inter River, and Handsworth. And to that point, to that end, MBFC and NSGSC have launched a petition a week ago. 1 week ago, we've garnered 1,500 signatures on that petition to build more fields. I just spent my brain time sharing some parent comments from that survey. So, our kids deserve more. A proper all-weather pitch does so much for the whole community. These gravel pitches are awful to play on and should only be used as a last resort. We can do better, and we have waited a long time. The cost benefit should be easy to see. North Vancouver is one of the most expensive cities in BC. It's disappointing that the district prioritizes building amenities like bathrooms and kitchens for a golf course, which primarily benefits a small affluent community over investing in our children. As a resident and taxpayer, I expect access to sports facilities commensurate with our population growth. The shortage of turf fields on the North Shore is an embarrassment to the municipality. Promises have been made time and time again, and it's now time to follow through on these promises and support youth sport on the North Shore. Just one last comment. As a past soccer coach, I found that there was a lack of fields. The installation of turf fields allowed more use to various sports, meaning field times, not just soccer. Not sure council is really connected on this issue with their community. Built fields, they are needed. So, all I'd say sports and appropriate field space play a crucial role in the development of our youth. And it's a must for community development, which I know is one of the district's main pillars, strategic pillars. So on behalf of North Shore Girls, I urge council to reprioritize field building. It's great to see that motion brought to the table and to allow room for not just one, but potentially 2 fields. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The third speaker I had signed up ahead of time was Emma Gibbons, but I don't see a virtual name that reflects that.
Emma's not able to.
Okay, so then I do have a virtual hand from Corey Cost. If we can move Corey Cost over as the last speaker.
Good evening, Your Worship. I hope you can see me and hear me.
I can see you and hear you clearly. Welcome. You have 3 minutes to address the council.
Okay, I'll try and keep it short. I just want to remind council that I have a record of my last 50 years of tax paying to the district, and it has many components to it. And I sure would like to add retroactively, at least for a few years, the newly divulged utility bill components. And from Metro Vancouver for the water and sewer, for the single family home, and the credits that are now being used. And incidentally, I do view the contribution of credits to reduce our debt as really coming out of another pocket of the public. It's not really separate. And if you add to that and look at the percentage increase without the credit, the amount we actually pay is 26.5% increase this year. So I would appreciate the last few years as well, just to sort of fill in the blanks that I will expand my spreadsheet of. I currently have all the other components on a spreadsheet, and since we've started this new utility bill that just came in the mail today, it would be appreciated to have that information. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Can I pick up on something that was mentioned and asked about?
Done with just a quick question, or?
I think so.
Okay.
The question was about what happened to the money that was going to be coming from the developers for the ATMs, which in 2023, according to what we voted on in 2023, which was the financial plan, first, second, and third readings, it came in at $4.5 million in developer funding. So I wonder if we could get some clarification on.
We can work to get additional information on that. One of the challenges, we have voted repeatedly to convert most of those buildings to rental only, which means they don't have a CAC component, or we've partnered with a number of housing providers that also provides no CAC component. So the amount of total CACs that we were going to be drawing from the Sealand neighborhood, we've reduced dramatically because of social housing and rental components.
There should be an accounting though.
Yeah,
What
we can produce
CACs
that.
have
And I
been pulled
actually
out.
have asked for that a long time ago, the specific accounting of where the CACs went to which social housing projects, or where did they go in the last 10 years.
There's the annual basic development report, which shows all of that information.
Mr. Stewart, additional comments?
Yeah, just one comment. You know, I'm actually quite offended by some of the comments from the soccer community right now. We have some of the best facilities in North America, certainly in North Vancouver, and we're continuing to build on those. And the idea that we're underserved is really egregious at the end of the day. And you can say all you want. We are striving to improve the facilities in the North Shore, but the idea that we are not responsive, that we are or don't care, and that we're not serving this soccer community is really not appropriate, and it doesn't serve to help us develop relationships that work together. And we can't do this if we're just going to actually be accused at every budget meeting that we're not doing enough. We're doing a lot, and that needs to be recognized at some point. I just want to say that because I live in another community that has 3 bloody soccer fields. and we're doing a lot. And we need to be recognized for that. And I really appreciate the soccer community actually recognizing how much we're doing in North Vancouver District, as opposed to North Vancouver City, West Vancouver. We need to be appreciated and recognized for what we're doing.
Well, I certainly understand the pressure they're under. If they are experiencing growth of 16%, they're under their own pressures as well. But I'm quite proud of the park system and rec services that we have in the community. One of the plans here was for us to have 8 AT fields. We've delivered on 7. We have 2 more that we're pursuing. So I don't think we're that far off the mark of what had been committed to. It's just when it was determined that gravel is no longer acceptable as a primary play surface, it takes time to replace it and upgrade it. Nobody's here saying we don't want to do that or we're not going to be pursuing that over time. We're just saying it takes time. It takes a tremendous amount of resources to do it.
Well,
And
and
so-
to be fair though, Mayor Little, we have deferred those 2 gravel fields because of other costs, right?
Yep.
And,
But
I
then there's-
But
then there's
Your
also
Worship, all this
Yeah.
takes money. A gravel field is now $4.5 million. This is not inconsequential costs to our municipality. And I'm not disagreeing about the need to do it. I'm just saying we need to place it in some kind of context. That's all.
No, we have other priorities as well, but I think we've been pursuing it in earnest, maybe not at a pace that some people appreciate, but we have been going in that direction.
move
All right,
adjournment.
I'll accept adjournment. We've completed the business of this evening's meeting, so I want to thank staff for their preparation of the reports for our consideration this evening. Everybody, have a fantastic week.